Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, we talk with leaders in the retail IT channel about their leadership journeys and what they've learned along the way. In this episode, we'll talk with Bill Fultz. He's the general manager for LINGA, a restaurant and retail software that's been under the PNC Bank umbrella since a 2022 acquisition. Bill began his retail IT channel career with VAR Delaware Business Systems, serving as general manager from 2004 to 2008, and then company president from 2009 to 14. He moved to the vendor side for the next 11 years, first as director of product at MenuSoft, which was acquired by Heartland, which was then acquired by Global Payments, where Bill served as VP of Product POS. Bill joined LINGA in early 2025, and he also is a part owner in 3 restaurants, and this fall he's planning on entering the hotel business as a co-owner. Bill, welcome to the Trusted Advisor.
Thanks, Jim. It's really great to be here. Thank you.
No, great to have you. So, as I mentioned, you've been with LINGA for about a year now, and I remember you and I go way back, well beyond that. And when you were coming on board with LINGA, you had shared with me your plans for a channel-friendly go-to-market strategy. And I know some of our resellers listening to the audience might be like, wait a second, a bank with a channel-friendly business strategy, that's certainly different. So can you talk about that strategy with our listeners and then give us an update of how that's progressing?
Yeah, happy to. So I think that to start at the very beginning is when I had moved on from Global Payments as VP of Product there, and obviously had been a huge part of the channel program that had grown there. I was actually looking to leave the industry, looking to do something completely different. I was sort of burnt out, as it were, and we've done a lot of great things. Very happy with what we have been able to do and do it in partnership with our community and the channel. But the world just felt very stale, and it felt very much like a numbers game, and relationships mattered less and less, and merchants were suffering, and VARs and dealers were suffering in this, and so I really had no intentions of sort of doing it all over again. And then PNC came knocking. And I said, yeah, well, I'm not interested. Thanks, but no thanks. Familiar with what you guys did, but I saw what some other banks have done with point of sales, and yeah, that kind of feels the same. But they kept knocking, thankfully, and so I tested them. And I said, look, I have some things of you. It would be interesting if PNC, which has over 1,600 outlets across North America, predominantly in the U.S. If you guys were able to leverage that with a community of channel partners, and that we actually worked in our communities together, that would be interesting. It would be interesting if we weren't a payments first software because we have to type strategy. That would be interesting. It would be interesting if we let our partners decide how and what we do with the merchants, because ultimately they're their customers or their merchants. We need to understand the position and a number of other things. And shockingly, they said, of course, that makes a lot of sense. That's what we've been thinking. That's why we want you here. And so that obviously gave me pause. I'm like, well, this could get interesting. This is a lot different. I think right now we're in a space in our industry where there's a couple sort of buckets that organizations fall into. There's the startup entrepreneurial people who are living from payroll to payroll, just trying to get the next thing, building some really great stuff. And there's amazing things being done in that space. But, that's a very stressful environment. I, for one, I'm getting too old for that, I guess, to put it mildly. And so you have those. Then you have the awkward middle, I call it. And these are folks who, they've built something, but they really haven't reached that profitability or sort of scalability. And so they're desperate for the exit. And what does that look like for a lot of folks? Well, it's getting acquired. Of course, I was a huge part of that environment for a very long time. Acquired, and I think I've acquired, bought, sold, or built 32 different platforms in retail and hospitality across my career. So I understand that space. I sympathize with it. But when you're in that mode, it forces you to do things that sometimes you really would not do unless you were sort of in this awkward middle. And then you have the 1-800, right? So it's all the way on the other side of the spectrum, and it's about numbers and managing to a quarterly and shareholders and whatnot. And so they sort of knew that. And none of those frankly are attractive to me at this point in my career. I didn't have it. I didn't really feel like getting others to come along with me and like, well, we're going to be different. Well, PNC and LINGA is quite different in the fact that we don't really fit into any of those buckets. We're a 160-year-old company. There are a few organizations in the world that can actually claim that and successful. $500 billion, like that's a pretty big parent company to make that's got our back. And so that gives us and affords us a lot of great things. So we built this program. Some of the questions that I just mentioned that I laid out with PNC, we've been incorporating that and really going over the last, call it 6 months in reality, leveraging the abilities to be able to be payment agnostic, actually create a channel program that actually looks at multiple parts of the channel. Because I think there's a range of different channel partners that we have the privilege of interacting with. And so we have the ability to work with them all within this sort of umbrella of independence. So we don't put them as, you don't have to use our payments. They can use their own payments. They can partner with multiple payment companies. If that's their business model, we have a place for them. And the bottom line is we signed up more partners, channel partners, in Q4 than in the last 18 months combined that LINGA had been doing. We literally have not been advertising because we are just taking the folks who are knocking on our door and getting them boarded and getting them respectfully incorporated in there. So we really haven't been actively pursuing. And we're just finding that there's this new ecosystem is really resonating with people. Like I've had VARs where I've visited their offices and sort of went through this, and they're like, that's not reality. There's no way this is true. Like, well, here's the paperwork to prove it. Here's the legalese.
I do have a contract. This is not just in the marketing materials.
Yeah. This isn't just words. It has legitimacy behind it. And one VAR interaction, I won't mention who they are because I'm not trying to embarrass them, but it was a husband-wife team, and they were in tears at the end of it. And they said, we really thought that this was the end of the industry. We thought we were just going to have to figure out a way to sell this and get out because we had come to the end of the road, and it just feels like everything just opened up. And they've been doing great with us. They've been out with us for 4 months, really starting to get involved. And we've done what I've done a lot in the channel, which is bring people together. I don't do things in isolation. I don't believe in that. My leadership style, we can talk about that in a bit, but I really like to put people in a room and have open conversations. The best ones are ones you know about. The worst conversations are the ones not mentioned. And so we brought all these partners together who historically within LINGA, because they had a number of channel partners prior to our arrival, didn't even know the others existed.
Yeah.
Didn't know where you're there. Like, so when I brought some of those VARs into the room for the first time, and we're like, well, this is so-and-so from here, and this is what they do. It was culture shock. They some of them have been partners for a decade and had never spoken to each other, had never interacted. And that we've changed that culture. So we have them talking together. It took us a while for some of them to warm up and realize, hey, we're better talking together than trying to run our own playbooks.
Yeah.
And I've seen great relationships foster outside of even the LINGA, impact their meeting. We've got WhatsApp channels, and they're all communicating with each other directly now and interacting. And that's just a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I guess a learning that we're having from an RSPA standpoint, but it's not just for ourselves, but it's throughout our whole community is, like I said, nobody can go this alone. Nobody internally is going to develop everything that you need for your business. And so that sense of community, that sense of connection and relationship, that predates I shouldn't say any, but really significant business progress. And that's really like something that's really been really loud to us the last couple years, especially. And that's almost what it sounds like you're saying. If you just try to operate in a silo or have your partners operate in silos, you're only going to get so far. But if everybody understands each other and there can actually be some synergy, then you can really move faster than you could have even imagined. Am I understanding that's kind of what you're saying, that partnership, that core of community, that has to be the foundation of what you're going to do to be successful in the retail IT channel?
100%. And, and to boil that down into say like a practical application of how this looks is, when we got there, and I'm going through my orientation and I'm learning all the things that this business has been doing, good and bad. I think day 3, when I was sitting down with the sales teams and we were looking at pricing, and of course, multiple systems, multiple platforms, lots of pricing strategies. And after they got done explaining it to me, like I think I had a serious headache. I'm like, I congratulated all of them in the room. I'm like, you have created the most complex pricing I have ever seen.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I consider that a compliment, but you do get the award.
Yeah.
And but rather than go in with the sledgehammer and be like, well, let's just go do this. I said, look, we're going to do this differently. And we've done this actually now multiple times, and people are really starting to understand like the value of it. So when we did the pricing, of course, we started to figure out a model, and we did all of the analysis, and we brought all this stuff together. And then I said, okay, we're not going to roll this out. I'm not even going to ratify that and say this is actually what we're going to do. Let's go partner to partner, and let's get their feedback.
Yep.
Let's understand. And this is an idea. This isn't a mandate. This isn't a decision. So we did that intentionally for over 2 months, door to door, virtually, of course, going through it. We got feedback. This doesn't work for me. I have this client over here. This would be a horrible structure. What about that? They're a multi-store, like all these variables that we didn't, we know about them, but you fail to account for them. So we kept making tweaks and modifications. And back around Thanksgiving, we said, okay, after all the feedback, after all the changes, here's where we're at, everyone. What do we think? And everyone gave it the thumbs up. So, okay, we're still not going to roll it out. We're going to roll it out with our new boarded partners. We have so many of them right now. I want to see how they do as new partners versus some of our historical, old guard, and see how they do with it. Because I know the old guard, when you have change, sometimes they don't adapt to it as well. That's just human nature, no indictment. Well, we saw the uptake on new partners was phenomenally better than what it had been historically. Well, that wasn't a surprise. And when we surveyed our new partners and said, how's this pricing working for you? I can verbally quote somebody on the spot, and I am within the tax accurate. And it feels really good. I haven't been able to do that, I don't know if ever. Mm-hmm. And then we're like, okay, we're on to something here. And then on January of this year, we rolled it out to everyone. It's now available to all. But it was this very methodical piece of communicating with the channel. They were as much an architect of this final output as the parent company. And ultimately, it doesn't matter what we design. If it doesn't resonate with them, what have we done? We've added complexity. We've added irritation, stress. There's plenty of that to go around, just things we can't control. So we do that a lot. Even our logo, which has been completely revamped, changed, was a process of intentional micro question surveys over a really rapid 15-day period where we just kept modifying. We used some AI to help us sort of accelerate those feedback loops. And by the end of it, I was like, this is now the new brand. And there's been over 300 of you who've helped create it. It wasn't my idea. It wasn't an emotion. It wasn't someone's pet project. This is what happens when we design things as a community. Yeah. And it's really fun. It actually takes a lot of stress off as an organization. Like, we don't have to get it all right because we can rely on our channel, who now knows that we're serious about taking their feedback and actually making something happen with it.
Yeah, to me, if you don't do that methodical, collaborative approach, it's what I call jack-in-the-box management, right? It's dun, 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 dun. All of a sudden, boom, you spring it out. Everybody gets startled. There's something that's wrong with it. The other thing is when you're talking with, folks, not the initial individuals about the program, if they say, I don't like this, part of what you can say is, well, the other, 100 people we've talked to or 50 or whatever, they seem to like it, right? So it's not just some management edict. And so it's interesting you bring that up. And it ties in with, I wanted to ask you, I mentioned at the outset that you led a VAR business, for about a decade. How has that shaped your approach as a leader at vendor organizations? My guess is you've been on the receiving end of jack-in-the-box leadership from some of your vendors, and you're like, this does not work for us, and you just kind of have to deal with it. Talk about how has being a VAR impacted you, even many years later today.
I don't think I could overstate how impactful those first 10 or 12 years were. And even before taking on the general management, I was, doing deployments and running tech support and taking phone calls. So it's been really, I've been very fortunate, not intentionally, I could take no credit for it, but the career arc that I have had has really built upon each other very naturally. And so in those early days, being a VAR, you had to be scrappy, you had to be innovative, you had to figure out how to make recurring revenue work when vendors didn't have recurring models to work in. And so it's, and all the challenges that brought and opportunities, to be fair. So that I had a huge amount to do. And to your point, yeah, there was a very much, I've been in that position and I know what that feels like. I think that has served me really well. I understand, the impact of decisions, and how they can have consequences far beyond what we really intend them to do. And so being very intentional, trying not to make those mistakes. Sometimes it's necessary in a moment, but you find that should be the rarity, not the rule. And I think that's been a part of it. I think also, particularly within the VAR, I started to develop, because we were a VAR for some softwares, and back in that day we're talking like the Microses of the world and the NCRs, is the sun never set on the Micros empire, or however that went. So we were got some like big boys, right? And we were just this little VAR up in the mid-Atlantic. And at that point, I think it really helped instill like you can be successful despite Goliath being out there. And I have lots of friends in Micros and NCR. I love them all. But I always envied, as that VAR, if I only had a portion of those resources, what we could do. If I only didn't have to worry about making payroll next week, what I could really go focus my energy on. So in others I've seen where that soured them, right? I can't win, I can't do that, and they've sort of gotten this defeat. I've seen that across my fellow dealers at the time, and you can't win here. It's impossible.
Yeah.
I could have taken that approach, but we just helped develop a mindset where it's like there's always challenges. There's always the bigger fish in the pond, but it doesn't mean you can't be successful, and it doesn't mean that you're still you can't find a path that's good for you and the people in your company. And so I really learned that, and not to make excuses, because it's so easy to make excuses in that space, and to really just realize, you make the destiny that you're willing to take on to some degree. And there's a piece where I think that comes critical. We'll talk about that a little bit in my journey, where I think I actually that played at a personal level that really was beneficial to learn those lessons early, because I was going to need them later on.
Yeah. And I guess so that's well said. I can't remember who it was, but it was one of an industry event that somebody said, it might have been Dan Bratlin, I think, from CoCard was the one who said, a lot of small business owners, they say, oh, I'm going to grow to be this big. And that's the max that they grow to it, as opposed to saying, hey, maybe we could even be more than what they are, right? It's almost your belief puts the artificial cap on it. So I guess let's shift from your experience as a reseller, but also ties in with, you've had experience leading an SMB organization earlier in your career. How has that influenced you as a leader inside of very large organizations that work with SMBs, right? You're not just a, giant bank, working with other giant banks. You're working with a lot of, under 10 employee, under 20 employee organizations. How's that experience shaped what you do and how you behave as a leader?
Well, I think, building upon seeing what the impacts were at the street level, seeing how merchants responded to some of those changes, having to speak to merchants on changes or things that were not awesome, and having to sort of be the front person to absorb all of those colorful comments, as they gave feedback on and being accountable, because ultimately being a VAR, you're accountable, whether that's legally accountable, doesn't matter, to your merchant, to your customer, you're accountable. And that's a tough spot to be in. And so that has always stayed with me. I, to this day, and I think that it still shocks people, which kind of makes me wonder how others are approaching it at times. But when I tell a VAR or I tell a merchant, well, I'll get on the phone with them direct. It's not a problem. Like, you don't have to carry this news, or sorry, this fix isn't going to be available until here. You thought it was there. Like, you don't need to. I will get on the phone and have that conversation. And they're like, why would you do that? And I'm like, because I understand how much that hurts, and you shouldn't feel alone in that. So I think it's absolutely shaped a lot of how I approach things, even in a scaled organization. And the time, I would say, what I've built upon on that SMB space into the larger, vendor space, and in my time at Global and Heartland, and now in PNC LINGA, I've learned the art of scale, which is, I don't think as a SMB, like that was a blind spot for me for sure. Like we could do everything in a hero moment. We could go do some crazy stuff, but it would scale.
Yeah.
Could you do it day after day? Could anyone on your team do that? Or did it require, one of a few people in the organization to actually go make that thing happen? Otherwise it wouldn't work. So I learned that. And those were hard lessons. Like I think I approached him in the early days, some of the stuff at those companies, and we approached it like an entrepreneurial, like, oh yeah, we can go build this, stand it up, and we can have it ready in 48 hours, and there we go. And then it's like, okay, what happens when 5,000 clients hit it?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, that's not going to work. And then having to go back and rebuild. So understanding that there is a perspective that says to build something that's scalable, sometimes you need to go a little slower so you can go faster, which I know is a huge cliche we've all heard, but it really is true. And I think that we're living that out in this current moment. My desire to grow and to evangelize and share all the good things that we're doing, like I want to go fast, but it's actually better to be temperate in that, because if we went too fast, the experience I don't think would be great. I don't think that we would be able to do that. Like we're getting there, and we're building those structures out, and getting the team in place, and they're hearing and seeing how this can work. But this is a process, and I think taking some time to do that is something that I have learned in the larger vendor space. That in that earlier of our days, it was the ready, fire, aim, or however that goes.
Sure. Yeah. Or like I said, the Jack in the Box method. There's also the hide and go seek method. Ready or not, here we come. Right? Like we're gonna roll this out because we have the idea and we're pressing it that way.
Yeah.
But people are under that pressure, right? People want to see something happen. And so if you have two people building a house side by side, in the first month, if one just starts building on the sand, right, they're going to look like they're making a lot of progress, and the person next to them might be digging down and building a foundation, but the one digging the foundation is going to last longer. And it seems like that's a hybrid understanding that you've had from both working with an SMB that understands the agility, but then also these larger companies to say, oh, that's what it takes to scale. Am I understanding that correctly? Like that kind of blends your two experiences together.
Yeah, I think you said it well. And that was a question that I proposed to PNC, and I'm like, hey, what does this look like in a quarter? And they actually shocked me when they said, look, we're a 160-year-old institution. We think in 10-year increments. Don't worry about the quarters. Build something that we could stand behind and has reputational value, that 10 years from now we look back and say these were the great decisions that we made that got us here.
Yeah.
That is a very different world to live in compared to where I've been lately.
Yes. No. So thank you for that. I appreciate you. And let's dive into your background a little bit. And so I'm hoping you could talk about specific experiences from early in your career that really shaped you as a leader. Can you tell us like one story that's really stuck with you and shaped how you think, how you behave today as a leader?
Yeah, I think that there's, if we talk about the one story, the seminal story, in my career arc, I think has to go to, there is a gentleman, famous businessman, Bob Buford. He runs the Halftime Institute, really great leader, has, built leadership workshops. I've read a lot of his work, good stuff if you want to check that out.
Say his name again, Bob
Buford. He's passed away now, but his organization still is there. And he has this concept called halftime, which is in our career, we reach this halftime stage, and the way that we play the second half doesn't have to look like the first half, and actually probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
Like we've learned a lot, we understand more, so we can approach the second half of our career in a quite different perspective with intentionality versus, well, we're just going to go out and see what happens during the first half, and maybe we'll win and we'll be ahead before we go to halftime. But looking at the second half is more driven with intentionality. And I think I've touched a little bit about that. That's why I was very specific when I had my list of things back to PNC. Like, yeah, my second half, yeah, I don't want to do exactly what I did in the first half because, yeah, it was fun, but I got, how they say that? I already got the t-shirt. I'm good.
Yeah.
I gave you a second.
Yeah.
So there was that intentionality. And so that halftime for me, if we look at like that moment where things changed, was a bit different for me than I think a lot of folks. I think for many people, at least from what I see, it's like an evolution. There isn't like a single point in time where you can go, that's when like a light bulb went off and I kicked it into a second gear. But it was that way for me. And it came down to a point about 4.5 years ago now. And I was ripping and roaring, and I could, wasn't enough time in the day for all the energy that I have, and we were just moving and burning and shaking. And it was fun. I was enjoying it, and there was an auto accident, and in a literally snap of a finger, life just stopped. And all of the ways that I had approached things, all the sort of the attitudes that I had accumulated for good or bad, like all of that became challenged in, I would say, a hyper compressed time frame of days. And without getting into the details, that change was amazing. And I am thankful for it, because I don't know how it could have happened without something like that. So some specifics.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've always been, no mountain too high, nothing too grand. Let's go do, let's go conquer two major things at the same time. Like, just never enough. And I learned in a split second that it's okay to ask for help, because I had never accepted help. People always come along and they give their, hey, how do you need a hand with this? Could you, no, we're good. Thanks so much. Right. The obligatory thanks, but no thanks. Mm-hmm. And I realized, those types of responses were extremely selfish. When someone offers to help, whether you need it or not, when you deny that, you deny them joy. You deny them the good things that come out of that helping hand. It's not as much as what they're helping you with is what you're allowing them to help in. And I did not understand that until that moment where I had to ask for help for the most basic of things, and realized it wasn't a sign of weakness. It was just a sign of honesty. And it has changed that dramatically. The other element that I would say is I've always been very, even at a young age, very empathetic to others. I could understand people's perspectives. I think this is why I've been pretty successful in business. I can quickly put myself in that person's shoes and try to, some people call it the sales chameleon. I think that's a little crass. I actually think there's really good things in that. Like, I can feel what you feel. I can see what you see. These are good things to interact, especially in a community like ours. But I realized that was surface level. A lot of times folks would want to engage in a deeper connection, and I would just be so go. We got missions to go. Thanks so much. Yep, you stay here. We're going on to the next town. We're that sort of mentality. And then in that moment, just because of some of the circumstances at the time, I couldn't leave when someone wanted to talk. And you just had to slow your mind down. I mean, what I realized very quickly is there's some really good human interaction that I have been glossing over.
Yeah.
I realized that everyone has stories that are valuable. Even sometimes the way some people tell them, you may be like, oh, all right, skipping. But actually for them to go through that's a real human connection. And I have been missing those, like, genuine connections. And I will now, things I've learned, and I guess I don't think I would have learned it if it was something like very big that snapped it into places. I will stop and listen to anyone for any period of time and let them get through whatever they want to get through, and let them feel heard, and actually take that in and do something with it, whether it's a word of encouragement, whether it's connecting them with some resource that's better adept to help them, whether it's changing an idea or thought. Like, that has been amazingly beneficial in leading up to where I am now, what I'm doing in the business, and sort of how I have to lead in this moment. But that moment, like that incident, it's just that thing that happened. I don't really look at it as an accident, because it was highly beneficial. That changed a lot. And while I would wish that on no one, I'm actually thankful that it happened, because I do believe I lead better, and I'm able to help people in a more complete way.
Yeah, so I really appreciate you sharing that. And it sounds like your advice for folks is, before something externally slows you down in ways that you didn't want to be slowed down, slow down other things, like change the scenery to really benefit those other folks, and listen to them. I guess, am I understanding that's kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. It takes intentional effort. Like for a lot of us that are wired to go, and
Yeah.
many of my colleagues and such in the industry are, and it's a beautiful thing to have that drive. But there is a bigger life happening around us, and
Yeah.
it's good to put that in perspective.
Yeah. I'll just say this personally, it's interesting you bring up that story right now. So for the folks who are, listening and watching, we're recording this the day after the National Retail Federation show, NRF. So my drink, if anybody's watching, there is Mountain Dew in this because it's like 3 really super long and intense days. But what we had done in the past as an organization was, because we wanted to your point, go, 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 add new members, add new members. I always had a list of people to prospect there and then some members to spend time with. But then we just learned, like, I'd be talking to a member, they'd want to spend more time. I'd want to spend more time, but I'm like, I got this list right I got to get to, but they didn't care about the list I had to get to. So we changed it this year that John Greger, who's our director of business development, he did all prospecting. Chris Arnold, our director of member services, he did a ton of member engagement and just a little bit of prospecting. All I had on my list were members. And
Yeah.
boy, was it great to be able to spend time in somebody's booth and then say, let me introduce you to so and so, and me go, good. That'd be great. Like, this is what I am here for. And that's kind of what it sounds like you're saying is make intentional time to invest with people. And so it means you're only going to spend time with 4 people instead of 14. That's going to be better for those 4, and you can get to the other 10 later. If I'm understanding correctly, like from a leadership standpoint,
Yeah.
you cannot be rushing through the process of genuinely caring about people, or else it is just empathetic, and or it's just surface level empathy, and it's going to break down over time.
No, I think you said that well. And I mean, how that looks at a practical level is if you're having you're involved in a meeting, a one-on-one, you're discussing, and there's substance that's happening, and like, don't be time bound by the meeting because, oh, time's up, I got to roll to the next one. It's like, send a note to the next one. I'm going to be 5 minutes late. I'm in a really great conversation I need to finish out. Like, I mean, you think about that, what you're teeing up for the next person is, well, what was so great about that one, and how can I have that conversation? Like, it perpetuates itself in value. And it's definitely been a positive spot. And I'm not just talking about in the business space, even with my own kids, just at a personal level, like when they're going through their day, it's like, actually, okay, I'm actually going to turn the screen off, and I'm going to actually look at you and interact with you, because right now, hey, you want to talk about your day, and that's important. And I've seen great changes even in my own kids. I've seen them respond to that.
Very well said. All right, we're going to pause here to let our listeners and viewers know about the Retail Solution Providers Association. The RSPA is North America's largest community of retail technology VARs, software providers, vendors, and distributors in the retail, restaurant, and grocery verticals. To accelerate your success through an RSPA membership, email membership@gorspa.org. And to tie into what Bill and I are saying, like, it is genuinely a community. Like at NRF, there's 35,000 people there, and you don't know a lot of them, but the RSPA folks seeing other RSPA folks, it was like, great. Hey, it's like be able to see a friend as well. Also, we want to thank these channel focused companies who support the RSPA and make this podcast and video series possible. Our gold sponsors are Blue Star, CoCard, Epson, Global Payments, Order Counter, and ScanSource. And then finally, make sure you save the date for Retail Now 2026, the Retail IT Channel's #1 trade show, education conference, and networking event. This year's event is set for July 26th through 28th at the new Caesars Forum Conference Center in Las Vegas. For more information, visit gorspa.org/Retail Now. Retail Now is where the industry meets. Alrighty, so my next question for you, Bill, it looks like about 15 minutes left that I want to dive in. Can you tell us about, you've been really open. Can you tell us about a mistake that you made as a leader and what you learned from it? Could be a recent mistake, could be a long time ago, could be a colossal disaster, could be just when you fell short of your standards. You willing to share a mistake that you made?
Yeah, I think that a mistake that I've made numerous times is realizing that when I have feedback or criticisms to share in reality with either a peer or a downstream colleague, realizing that just because I want to share it does not mean it's always the optimal time for them to hear it. And I can tell you some disastrous examples.
Oh, go on, please. We said we got 15 minutes left.
Yeah. A great example is we're going through our rebranding, efforts just recently, and the team is sharing multiple iterations of things, some of them not so great, awesome. And I had just come from another meeting, and I was sort of running from one to the other, and the first thing they showed me was just awful. And my feedback was pretty direct and quick, and it was, this is, well, what are you thinking? Like, this isn't anything that's going to work. These are the reasons why. Do you even understand what you do? And as those final words had like slipped out off the tongue, I realized while all that may be accurate, that was not the way to share that type of feedback. Because they're very passionate and they're involved and they're trying to create great things. And it's not that they wouldn't have changed them or modified them, but to come in there, it was like a sledgehammer where, a smaller hammer would have probably been much more effective. And so I would say, numerous times in the past, like coming in with that, everybody loves the term radical candor. Mm-hmm. And radical candor doesn't give you the excuse to be a jerk.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So I think that's a lesson that I continually try to refine, because I do love giving quick feedback, and both for the positive and the negative. Right. But there's a way to do that and do it with grace. And that's something that even to this day I still struggle with, even with all the learnings and all the foibles. Like I have to work on that one personally.
Got it. Interesting. There was I worked for a couple brothers, and they told me about the tempers that they used to have. They would ask questions. They would say things like, "That's one way of looking at it. Let's look at another one." Like that was a very nice way to do it. And they talked about before. This shows how back in time they would do tape reviews for sales calls. They'd be driving down the street with a sales rep, traveling to something, and they would get so angry they'd pop the tape out, crack it in half, and throw it out the window. They're like, probably not very good from a character. Like people are not going to receive that feedback from me well. So how do you control that? Like, how do you make sure? Because in the moment, it is easier to faster just to say like, ugh, next, like show me another one. How do you get the right outcomes for moving the business forward at an appropriate pace, but also respecting how the other person feels? How do you remind yourself to stay within the guidelines?
Yeah, I have two very practical things that I do. One is if you see me writing, if we're ever in a meeting and I'm writing, that's because I'm censoring myself. I'm writing the thing down that I probably shouldn't say, and I'm looking at it, and that couple extra seconds allows me to reframe it. And generally, what is written down is not what gets said, or sometimes I let them go for a few more minutes before I sort of call it back to what's center. Mm. That is a technique that I use whether in virtual meetings or in person. So I, probably shouldn't have told my leadership team that. They now know when I'm writing to be like, okay, just stop talking.
Yeah, but that writing is better than pouncing on somebody, right? And cutting them off mid-sentence, and then we get to, then they just start walking into a meeting and go, what do you want me to do? Right? Because they know whatever they explain is going to get shot down. So. Got it. So can you you've touched on your leadership style. How would you describe it? Like, can you put that into a few words? And then what are some actions you take, when you engage with your teams to reinforce the approach that you're seeking?
Yeah, I mean, not to be, overly cliche with it, but, it's treat others how you would want to be treated, like at its core. And it doesn't mean if that's an executive within the business, or, it's an independent contributor. Like if you approach things from that perspective, it's going to put it at least, you're going to be in the right ballpark to start. And I've been asked this question a lot. What's your leadership style? I've been through a number of courses, like I'm sure we all have. And, as you try to figure out the nuance there, but, I don't know that any of them resonate. And with me, like, servant leader, or, different versions. And I think that there's a couple of reasons for that. One is at that high degree of empathy that I mentioned earlier. I just have that. It's sort of an innate one of the things I've been blessed with. So that gives me perspective. That the other part is I've had a really blessed opportunity to do almost every function in this industry at multiple levels. Senior executive down to independent contributor, across even like development and product and sales support. Like I've done all of those things. And so, my leadership style that I've often coined now is it's adaptive, right? And it's somewhat situational, and that's not to mean that it's inconsistent, but you have to realize that a single leadership style is not effective at scale. Like if you only have one way of addressing things in a certain way, as great as it is, It's not going to fit every situation. And here's why. Everyone that you're working with is different.
Yeah.
Everyone responds differently to different interactions, different styles, different language, different words, different actions. Some prefer an email in advance before you get there. They want a lot of detail before they get there. That's one of the things that we did with my team when I first got there, is we actually brought in an outside leader who I highly respect, and we went through each other's Enneagram types. Whether you believe in Enneagram or not, it's not really the point, but it gave us a basis for understanding, hey, when I'm working with so-and-so, they need more detail before they show up. They want to know the gritty. There's others who they want to be emotionally enthusiastic about whatever you're going to give them. They want to feel the passion. They're more innate. The others are going to be more pragmatic. They want to know why we did this versus something else. So we did that all as a group effort just to understand how to work with each other, how to lead each other and be led by each other. And even within that small group of 7 or 8 folks, we had 7 or 8 different types. Now, expand that out to now a 300-person organization. There's all sorts of wonderful variations and combinations of that. And so that flexible style leadership is really important. This is how it looks in a practical way. We had a number of great announcements last week. And so I was doing back-to-back interviews and webinars and all sorts of things to get the word out. And all of those had a common core, but because the audience are different, some were partners, some were internal colleagues, some were bank colleagues. You modify that so it resonates with each one of those audiences.
Yeah.
The core was the same. The message was the same. There was consistency, but it was given in a way to hopefully reach and connect with them at real levels. And so that's why I say you have to be adaptive. When you get to this stage, I think you have to be adaptive because the environment and the people that you're going to interact with are an amazing variety. And it requires you to be flexible.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've got to meet them where they are. And to your point
100%.
of there's sometimes where folks are long talkers, other folks you've really got to ask them tons of questions to pull it out of them, right? Somebody you might say, "Hey, how you feeling?" And they'll go on forever. Someone else, "How you feeling?" They'll be like, "Good." And you're like,
Yep.
"I don't think they're good," right? And you need to drill in. That's really interesting. So it's a combination of empathy, like genuinely caring about them, but being flexible to meet them where they are, not,
Yep.
"Hey, this is how I am. I'm a fast talking, collaborative kind of guy, so we're going to be fast talking and collaborative on everything."
Yeah, and I show up in environments, and I've done that even here, where I would say I do battlefield leadership, which is like, all right, everybody get behind me. I'm going to go first, and it's going to be rocky, but we've got to move. Staying here is not an option.
Yeah.
But you can't live in that. You can't exist. But it's sometimes to get people out of a bad situation, you've got to say, it does. Look, we'll check our feelings in a moment. We've just got to get out of here because this is not a good place to be.
Yeah, and you saying that reminds me. So, folks work remotely. That's easy to do one-on-one. But if you're working in an office, that's why it's important to pull somebody off to the side or pull them into a room, because the way that you work with somebody, if somebody overhears it, they might be like, "Whoa, what a jerk," or "What a softie," because they have a different personality type while you're catering to that person and their needs. Like you said, you don't change the rules of the principles, but it's the delivery and a lot of the tactics around it. So, very interesting point. Yeah, flexible. So only a few minutes left. I got a couple more questions for you. I'm curious, who are some leaders that you look up to as mentors and who've helped you shape your leadership approach? And specifically, like if you want to name names, that'd be great. But also, what did they do? What did they say that's had a lasting impact on you years later?
Yeah, I had a remarkable trio in growing up that set the foundations for everything that would happen. And they were my father and my grandfathers. And although, yes, all family, they couldn't be any more different. My dad, highly scientific, 3 doctorates, taught at universities, in business, had a very unique perspective. My one grandfather, highly successful small businessman. I learned a ton of what it looked like to own your own company. And he only graduated the 6th grade.
Okay.
To another grandfather who was a railroad worker and just showed up every night to do his job. And, so those perspectives that I didn't understand at the time, but they all had value. And it helped shaped me into looking at, you can't judge a person by what you think. Like if you look at someone, he hasn't graduated the 6th grade, he probably worked for minimum wage most of his life. I'm like, he was one of the most wealthiest persons I've ever known, and it had nothing to do with his education. And that set the stage for me to come into situations and just sort of be open-minded with folks, and not to have that sort of prejudgment. And I think that I know that set the stage for me to work with other leaders and really just be open. And I've had various leaders. Some are awesome, some I learned a ton from, but I don't really like. So that wasn't the prerequisite of getting value
Sure.
and working good together.
Sure.
Was many of them I did, thank goodness. But I learned a lot, and all of them added something to the mix. And I think that's something as you grow in leadership, is really enjoying seeing perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean that becomes your perspective. Some elements that make sense, and others it's like, I see where that is great, and I could apply it this way probably a little better in my circumstance. And that's that flexibility again. It's realizing that just because someone may use more 4-letter words than I care for in their leadership style doesn't mean there's not something to hear or gain from them. And sort of approaching that openly. And I think that's why I think over the years with the leaders I've had great relationships with, even the ones I don't love to share a drink with after work, but we've had really good understandings and communication, and I've been thankful to have many of them in a lot of different varieties over the years. It's been very helpful.
And part of what it sounds like you're saying is when somebody says something that's like, boy, that does not ring right with me, instead of just saying, that makes no sense whatsoever, you say to them, why do you say that? Like, give me your perspective. And then you're going to be like, oh, now I at least see where they're coming from, as opposed to, that guy's a jerk, right? And they're like, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, agreed.
We've only got a couple minutes left, and we've covered a bunch. What would you say what would be your final advice for our audience? Like, let's say you have a 3-minute ride share with a VAR or ISV leader. What advice would you give them, especially if they're early on in their leadership and business career?
I'm going to say 2 things, and they're going to feel like they're opposed, but they're actually together. So just hear the thought out. So at its core, don't wait to move. If you're waiting for perfect, it's likely never going to come around. Don't let that be the thing that prevents you from moving. In that same thread, don't be so anxious to jump out of something just because it's not working quickly. So I know those things feel like they're different, but I would say many of the things that I eventually did in the course of my career, I wish I would have moved sooner on them, because eventually the outcome would have probably been a little better and a little faster. Imperfect never arrived. There was always some challenge. There was always some competitor. There was always some new thing to challenge and sort of create opportunity to improve, but not giving up the moment you hit resistance. And that's a really delicate thing to do. And so the last piece of that would say, and keep lots of people around you who can help give you guidance when it's time to jump and when it's time to stay, because sometimes you're so close to it, it's hard to be objective. And I have found it very valuable to ask others around me in that moment, even people who aren't even connected to the thing that I'm involved in. Whether it's a family member, it's that, hey, look at this situation. Here's what I'm faced with, and they're like, it's been very valuable in understanding that sort of that opportunity. But don't wait. There's so many great things in life. Go get it.
And tying in with what you said earlier, so thank you for that, is the flexibility, right? If you don't have a one-size-fits-all approach to it, the flexibility is going to require you to make all sorts of decisions, right? That it doesn't mean everything I give 6 months, and at 6 months and 1 day we'll either pull the plug or it's a win. Some might be at 3 months, some might be 3 years later. So it sounds like what you're saying is you've got to have a good team around you, just gather all sorts of data so you can make the right decision, as opposed to just having a style or a predetermined, here's how we're going to go about it. You're just learning along the way as you get more data, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's a principle that much counsel makes is where wisdom comes from, and I'm a firm believer in that. The more people that you can have giving you advice, it doesn't mean it's all accurate. It doesn't mean it's all 100%, you should action on it, but it does make it for a better decisioning process.
For sure. Getting those additional perspectives that you don't have, because you're only going to have yours. And then you have to tap a lot of people on the shoulder and vacuum their brains.
That's right. Yeah. I've been very blessed to have lots of people who've given me great advice. So I would say where I am at is as much to do with their help as anything that I did on my own.
Excellent. Well, that does it for this episode of The Trusted Advisor. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. Before we go, big thanks again to Bill Fultz for sharing his wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RSPA Marketing Director Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the retail technology ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, please visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.